Thanks again to everyone joining the call, and thank you to Ben and Anna from Chest for organising. So just a few slides from myself to cover an introduction to Noteable, our service, and then I'll pass on to my colleague James to run through a demonstration of the service. My name is Anne Robertson. I'm Head of Services at EDINA, and James, my colleague, James Stix, is Service Manager for Noteable. And we're really pleased to be able to demonstrate the service to you this morning. So what is Noteable? It is a cloud-based computational notebook service which we have developed at the University of Edinburgh. And I thought it pertinent to just cover a couple of points in terms of what are computational notebooks. There may be many of you on the call who have a reasonably good understanding, but I always think it's useful to highlight a couple of key points when we're considering computational notebooks. And undoubtedly what we see is that these provide a far more user-friendly interface to a coding environment. So if one thinks of that classic IDE or an integrated development environment, they can be quite difficult interfaces to become accustomed to, and quite off-putting for the novice, the new person to coding. So they really are quite popular with those who are new to coding. And one of the key reasons for that is that within a computational notebook, you can bring everything into one place. So the code that's being written, the comments that are being written by the code, perhaps some data that's being visualized by the code itself, and you can create a real narrative, tell a story within the computational notebook, and it can be shared with others. So it's a far more user-friendly, intuitive coding environment, and that's really why they are quite popular, combined with their ability to share, package up a piece of code and the data that it's perhaps being interrogated with that code, and share it with others. In terms of Noteable, what have we done to make it a benefit to an institution, our computational notebook service? Well, to really take it back to basics, we have developed and we delivered the service by ourselves at Edinburgh University, and we've co-created the service with learning technologists and teaching staff at Edinburgh University. It's been an iterative process. Really, the service has been used at Edinburgh for a couple of years now in a beta and a prototype stage, and latterly as a fully robust service. But we've had a lot of excellent input from teaching staff in terms of what they would benefit from a centralised computational notebook service. One of the key features with Noteable is that it integrates with your institutional VLE. So your users authenticate using their VLE, and we've achieved that using a common standards-based LTI integrator, and therefore it works with the most common VLEs, so Blackboard, Canvas, Moodle. They all take advantage of this LTI integrator facility, and so Noteable connects and authenticates with all these VLEs, which we believe is a real advantage. Noteable is built upon Jupyter Notebook technology, so within that it comes with those standard notebooks you would get within a Jupyter notebook, so Python, RStan, Julia. But we've also enhanced it. We have provided and created other notebooks. So we have a geospatial notebook, we have an RStudio notebook, I think we have a Haskell notebook as well. James could provide a full list of those. So we have enhanced the types of notebooks that a user can access. And what's of real benefit to yourself as an institution is that within each of these notebooks, we have pre-installed the most popular or frequently requested libraries that we've experienced at Edinburgh University. And we commit to manage and keep those libraries up to date. So again, in terms of it being a cloud-based service, there is no overhead for yourselves in terms of maintaining different libraries, for different individuals. That's part of the service offering that we make. Another key benefit of Noteable to an institution and to your teaching staff is that we have developed an auto-grading function. And what this allows is the easy deployment of assignments to a mass numbers of students, and an ease of then pulling in those assignments at a particular time, a particular deadline, and auto-marking. So a teacher, a lecturer can define cells within a coding exercise where they expect to see particular types of code, particular statements, etc. And the lecturer can auto-grade how a student has delivered upon those particular pieces of code development, which again makes marking and assessment of coding exercises far easier and quicker. So that's a real benefit, and something that we developed with input from teaching staff at Edinburgh University. And for your users, for your students, what you can be comfortable with and what teaching staff are really happy with is that there is a guaranteed consistent environment for all users. So when a student's logging in, they're not being asked to go and download a library, a particular version of a particular library for a notebook. They are accessing a consistent standard environment. So it's quicker, and there's a guarantee that the experience is the same for all learners, which again, we've learned from our own institutional colleagues is a tremendous benefit. So sorry, just one more slide from myself. So accessing Noteable, Noteable is available through the CHEST framework via a CHEST agreement. It is a subscription service, and we can, with Ben and Anna, point you to the relevant pages on the CHEST site, which have our pricing model. But most importantly, we've got fantastic amounts of documentation and support materials. We have a whole section. We had a couple of student interns work with us last year, and we've really made some quality, excellent documentation and support materials, which we would welcome you. They're publicly listed, and we'd really encourage you to have a look. And finally, there is a trial available for Noteable. You can contact James after the webinar, and we can set up a trial for you. Sorry, just move that forward. I just wanted to wrap up before we do the demo with a couple of testimonials. We had other institutions using Noteable. The first one's a really interesting example we've got from Queen's University Belfast. It's actually their law department who are using Noteable to introduce some of their students who are studying law, moving into their legal profession, to understand, the basics of computational thinking, coding, knowing that actually in the future there's a real groundswell where, legal agreements, etc., can be reviewed and assessed by machine learning, by coding examples. But what Queen's University Belfast wanted was to immerse their law students in an experience of understanding coding and understanding the potential for it. So they've been using Python. We think it's a wonderful example. And they found that the Noteable platform, again, built on a computational notebook, built upon Jupyter notebooks, gives that quite intuitive interface for their students. It's not as daunting as a fully matured IDE or coding environment. So that's a really nice example. And another couple here, a lecturer in geography from King's College London, again, just highlighting that it's for those novice coders that they've really found it wonderful, and having everything in one place and within the environment, and they're really happy with. and a lecturer from the mathematics department at Edinburgh University as well, talking about having the connectivity within the VLE and the ability to have the coding exercises, and the RStudio platform in one place has been really beneficial for them. We also have Bristol University using the service. They're using our geographical notebook for some of their geoscience students as well. So I thought it really important to share with you some testimonials and give confidence that other universities are starting to use our Noteable service as well. So that's a quick run through. I'll now hand over to James to provide a demonstration of the service.
Thank you very much, Anne, for providing that introduction to the Noteable service. And as you mentioned, Noteable is in short a cloud-based service to run computational notebooks for remote teaching and learning. Of course, due to COVID, the shift to remote working has been a major change in many of the ways of working for both educators and learners alike across the UK and the world. And so our aim with Noteable is to really enable users to access a reliable and secure platform where lecturers can teach coding activities and also develop assignments using the grading functionality that Anne mentioned for students to complete on the platform. So let's dive right into using Noteable. And of course, the focus of the service is on providing an educational environment with computational notebooks inside of it that are both easy to set up and launch and to run in a virtual classroom environment. So as you can see here, you can load Noteable through your browser and it runs directly on the cloud. And here you have a list of the programming languages available, as Anne mentioned during the presentation. Haskell is here, and we have a number of other ones as well. And you can even have languages like Stata that bring along a license that the customer can integrate into Noteable to run on the service. So to reiterate what was mentioned during the presentation, Noteable links up to your VLE, to your virtual learning environment, which will then control who has access to the system in your name. So the LTI standard that we use will authenticate your username and password that is used within your virtual learning environment to access the service and define your user space. So let's launch a geoscience notebook out of all the options we have here so that we can preload some specific libraries that will allow us to look at some data sets and visualizations within a geoscience type of notebook. So now we have access to the service dashboard, which gives you a top-level view of your workspace on Noteable. So what you can see here is what notebooks are running. You have access to the form grader, which we'll actually explore in a second. You have access to some IPython clusters, and here this is the assignments tab that you would have as a student. So as I'm a super user on Noteable, I both have the form grader and the assignments tab, but if you were an instructor, you would really be working with the form grader tab, and if you were a student, you would be focusing on the assignments tab. So as a student or instructor alike, this would be your own space, and you would have your folders and files here. This is what we call your home directory, which is unique to you within the Noteable cloud environment. And so we can start a notebook. Let's start this test one. As you can see here, it's launching. And this particular notebook uses specific libraries, as I mentioned, focusing on geoscience functionalities and features to provide a tutorial on how to process seismological data. And importing libraries through an open source repository is possible on Noteable by cloning them into your home directory. And it's pretty straightforward, as is shown here. And before we dive a little bit deeper into the notebook, let's backtrack a little bit to the rise of what we call computational narratives. So computers are good at consuming, producing, and processing data, but human beings, on the other hand, we're much better at processing the world through narratives and stories. And this means that for data and the computations that process and visualize that data to be useful for us in our day-to-day, they must be embedded into a narrative that's more human being friendly, a computational narrative, as we'll call it. And this tells a story for a particular audience and context by adapting computer speak into a narrative that a user will engage with. So as you can see in this notebook, we're able to describe the data and the context using these text cells right here, as well as weave in code blocks and code cells here to actually process that data and create visualizations with the specific libraries that I mentioned, like this one. So you're able to find the specific libraries for Noteable in our documentation, which Anne mentioned. We have a plethora of documentation available, and the notebook descriptions are here available through our public site. So you can see actually the different types of notebook that we have available and the specific libraries within it. So you might see some that you already want to be using, or you can also start using these if they're useful to your work. But you can also request ones to us directly, and we will integrate them into our roadmap plans for when we update the notebooks. So as a user, you can also add libraries that will remain in your user space for the running of a notebook session. And this is because every time that you start a notebook, you're essentially getting your own personal computer with a discrete home base or home directory that resets to 0 when you log out. But as I mentioned, we also add libraries that remain on Noteable, and customers reach out to us all the time with requests for specific libraries, as Anne touched upon earlier. So now that we've had a look at a notebook, and I could spend a much longer time inside this notebook explaining it, but for the purposes of this demo, I just wanted to show you what it looks like mostly. So in terms of creating an assignment on Noteable, if you are an instructor, as an instructor, you get the Form Grader tab, as I mentioned. And once I click on it, Noteable connects to your VLE, which means that it knows what course you're on and whether you're a student or an instructor with access to the grading features. So if I click on Add Assignment, let's just create the test assignment right here. And once you've created it, you go in here and you'll see that this is the actual space for the assignment. We haven't added anything to it yet. So we'd have to edit it and add an assignment by actually uploading one. You can also add an assignment in a different way. So you can upload it, you can create a notebook directly, or you can upload it through a Git repo as well, which means that it stays online and gets updated every time that the data that's in it is updated online. So let's upload one right here. As you can see, we have one ready. So with this pre-populated assignment, let's just open it here. You can see that there's some code and some text and what we call autograder tests as well, which is where the notebook can be used to mark a student's understanding of a concept. So we can write within these code blocks whether something is true or false, and we can have this automatically graded too. There are also manual grading options that I'll show you in a second when we go back to Form Grader, where you as an instructor can manually look at a response to a question and provide a mark and any additional comments. So with this notebook, the test includes some code to check if our code as instructors is correct as well. And when you're autograding the notebook, once the student has submitted it, there's some magic involved to hide this test that we're doing so that they can't access the correct answer that we have set ourselves for the notebook to know. So now we have the instructor's version ready. Let's go back to Form Grader and generate the assignment. So we can close this and go back to Form Grader. And of course, before we generate it, you have the option to edit it. But let's go ahead and generate it. And once you've generated, you'll get this success window hopefully popping up. Oh, I see we have someone waiting in the lobby. If Anne or Ben, you could please let them in. And then there's one more step involved for the students to actually receive the assignment, which is to click on release. Now, once you've generated it, you can preview it just to double check and make 100% sure that you're ready to release it. But let's actually go ahead and release the assignment for the students. So you can see successfully released the test assignment. And now let's go back to the student's perspective. And as we're on the same test course, I can actually play around as both instructor and student. As you can see, while there was nothing here before, now we have this assignment that we can fetch. So now you can see that the assignment is available to students on the course. And once I click on fetch, it moves from released assignments to downloaded ones, ready for you to work on the assignment as a student. As you can notice here, it's possible to upload more than one notebook at a time, which would show up here. So now you can open the assignment as a student, the same one that we looked at earlier as an instructor, and work on it with a student's view, where any hidden tests don't show up. And where once you are done working on the notebook, you can submit it simply by clicking on the submit button. So imagine that we've now completed all this work, even though we haven't. And we go back here and we can actually, if there are any auto-grading questions that as an instructor you set for the student to be able to look at some questions and see whether they got the answers right or wrong, or actually if they made any mistakes, you can validate and they can actually get suggestions on how to improve it. So here you can see that we didn't get many of the questions right because we didn't work on it, but you would be able to get some suggestions here from your instructor if they put it into the assignment, and you can also just run through the work that you've done. So now that we validated and we're ready to submit, we can click submit. And you can submit more than once, but an instructor would be able to gather the timestamps from each submission and know which the most recent one is and which the first one was. So now let's switch back to Form Grader and to the instructor view, where I can collect by clicking this button right here. and see if any submissions may have been made during the 2 minutes that I took my instructor hat off and was refilling my cup of coffee while the student worked on the assignment. And so voila, we can see that a student, in this case myself, submitted one already. And we can go into that student submission by clicking here and see that there's some auto-grading pending. So you can see here that we can click auto-grade and it will run through the notebook that the student submitted and auto-grade the questions that we had set to be to have predefined answers for. So we can see that that was successful. And then the manual grading tab I want to mention as well allows us to go into the student-specific submission and make any comments and suggestions that we would like. So as you can see here, I can go into the submission that was made a second ago, and we can actually make sure that we make any comments or check through the responses manually that the student made. So once we're done marking as instructors, we can go back here to the main form grader tab and to manage assignments. And once we've successfully collected the feedback and looked at the submissions, we can generate the feedback for the students. So we've generated it, and now we're ready to release it back to the students. And we can click just on this button here. And as you can tell, Noteable is quite intuitive through MBGrader in that it will gradually give you further options as you go along the auto-grading process. Well, these would have been hidden earlier when you were first creating the assignment and you hadn't generated it and released it yet. So let's click on release feedback here to see what a student would then get. So you can see that it was successful. And if we go back to a student's view, let's just go back to the home page and see what the assignments look like. So we can see that we actually have some feedback available now, which I can then fetch, go into the assignment here by clicking on view feedback and see the scores that I got in the assignment that I completed earlier. Now, because I didn't really work on it, I didn't do very well, so I wouldn't have passed this test probably, but you get the idea of how it works. So that actually gives you a full assignment lifecycle from creating an assignment to generating and distributing it to students, and then being able to collect the feedback from students from their submission. So there you have a run through of what the computational notebooks look like on Noteable and how the auto-grading feature works in the service.
Thank you very much.